There's a number that most people never calculate. It's not on your credit score, it's not in your bank statement, but it's the single most accurate predictor of whether you'll be financially free by your 50s or still grinding paychecks well into your 60s, just to keep the lights on. That number is the total lifetime cost of every single car decision you've ever made in your life. Not the sticker price, not the monthly payment, the total cost, compounded across decades, layered with interest, insurance, and maintenance. And the silent killer that nobody in a dealership will ever mention to you, the wealth you never built because you were too busy paying for something that was losing value every single day you owned it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Cars are the #1 reason average income Americans stay average. Not medical debt, not student loans, cars. Because cars are the one expensive, emotionally charged purchase that society has somehow normalized at every income level. Nobody questions it. Your coworker buys a new SUV and everyone nods. Your neighbor leases a luxury sedan on a $65,000 salary and nobody raises an eyebrow. It's just what people do. But what people do and what builds wealth are two very different things. And today, we're going to pull those two things apart. Let's start with the way most people decide if they can afford a car, because the method itself is fundamentally broken from the very beginning. The question most people ask is, can I make this monthly payment? That is the wrong question, entirely the wrong way to think about it. When you ask if you can handle a monthly payment, you're making a budget decision inside a vacuum, completely isolated from the bigger financial picture. You're not asking whether that payment is competing with your retirement contributions. You're not asking what happens when a repair bill hits on top of it. You're not asking what that same amount of money, redirected into an index fund, would look like in 25 years. That question never even gets asked. Banks understand this. Dealerships understand this. They have spent decades perfecting a system that isolates your attention to one small, digestible number: $400 a month, $500 a month. It sounds manageable, even reasonable, but that number is a carefully constructed illusion, designed to get you to commit to a financial obligation that may take 6, 7, even 8 years to fully escape from, during which time the car itself will have shed a significant portion of its value and required thousands of dollars in upkeep and maintenance costs, and cost you a compounding fortune in lost investment potential, money that could have been silently building wealth while you were busy making payments. The monthly payment is the magic trick. The real cost is what happens behind the curtain, and most people never look behind it. Let's talk about what your income actually gives you permission to buy, not how a loan officer would frame it, but how a long-term wealth builder would. The framework that survives contact with real life is built around keeping your total transportation expenses at or below 10% of your gross monthly income. Total transportation means everything: your car payment, your insurance premium, your fuel costs, and any regular maintenance. All of it, one bucket, 10%. If you want to be more aggressive about building wealth, and most people should be, that number drops to 8%. These aren't arbitrary thresholds. They're calibrated around a simple reality. Your income has to cover housing, food, healthcare, and savings. When transportation balloons past 10%, it starts cannibalizing everything else. So let's apply that to real salary levels, starting with someone earning $50,000 per year, a very common income level across the United States. After federal taxes and typical deductions, take-home pay lands around $3,300 to $3,500 per month. 10% of that is roughly $330 to $350. That is your entire transportation budget. Once you subtract gas and insurance, around $150 to $180, you have between $150 and $200 left for a car payment. At that payment level, with a responsible down payment and a loan term no longer than 4 years, you're shopping in the $7,000 to $9,000 range. That is a used car, not a new car, not a car with a panoramic sunroof and a 10-speaker sound system. That is reliable transportation, which, when you understand the math, is exactly what it should be. At $75,000 a year, take-home approaches roughly $4,800 to $5,200 monthly. Your transportation budget climbs to around $480 to $520. After gas and insurance, you've got approximately $300 to $360 for a payment. That puts you in the $13,000 to $17,000 range for a vehicle. That's the certified pre-owned market. late model used cars with remaining factory warranties, or older models that will run for another 100,000 miles with basic care. At $100,000 a year, take-home is typically around $6,500 to $7,000 per month. Your transportation budget sits near $650 to $700. Subtract your running costs, and your car payment ceiling lands around $480 to $500. That opens the door to vehicles in the $22,000 to $26,000 range. You're not in the luxury tier, but you have solid options. Late model sedans, compact SUVs, practical vehicles that are well-equipped and genuinely dependable for the long haul. For those earning $150,000 annually, take home near $8,800 to $9,500 monthly. Total transportation budget sits at roughly $900 per month, with a payment ceiling of around $680 to $700. That's a vehicle in the $32,000 to $38,000 range. Comfortable, capable, and financially responsible, but still not the $70,000 full-size truck that dealers will happily put you in if you walk through that door and let them run the conversation. One of the most destructive shifts in auto lending over the past decade has been the normalization of extremely long loan terms across the entire car buying market. 4 years used to be unusual. Now, 7-year loans are standard. 8-year terms are being offered, and people are accepting them because they make the monthly number feel reasonable. Here's why this is dangerous, beyond the obvious. When you finance a car for 7 years, you will almost certainly hit a period somewhere around years 4 through 6 where you owe more on the loan than the car is actually worth. Lenders call this being underwater. Most people just call it a nightmare they never saw coming. You want to sell or trade in, and you can't. You want to walk away from a car that's becoming unreliable, and you simply can't do it. You're locked in, paying for a depreciating asset while that same asset starts demanding expensive repairs on top of the payments you're already struggling to keep up with every month. The 4-year rule, financing for no longer than 4 years, exists specifically to prevent this from ever happening to you in the first place. A car financed for 4 years with 20% down should never be underwater for the most 12 to 18 months after purchase. After that, you're building equity, moving towards full ownership, and, most importantly, preserving your options. You stay in control of your own financial situation. Stretch it to 7 years, and you've essentially structured your own financial prison, one with monthly payments, a depreciating asset, and no early release for good behavior. Beyond the loan term, there's the down payment threshold, 20%. This isn't a casual suggestion. It's the buffer that keeps you out of negative equity territory from day one. Without it, the depreciation hit in year 1, which on a new car can reach 20 to 25% of the purchase price, can instantly push you underwater before you've even made a dozen payments. You drive off the lot, and mathematically, you are already behind. That is not a foundation. That is a financial hole. Let's spend a moment on the cost that's never listed on the window sticker, never mentioned in the financing office, and yet is the single largest expense most car buyers incur: depreciation. When you buy a vehicle, particularly a new one, you're not just paying for the object, you're paying for the privilege of being the first person to own it. And the market ruthlessly discounts that privilege the moment you drive off the lot. In the first 12 months, the average new car loses between 15 and 25% of its purchase value. In the first 5 years, total depreciation typically reaches 50 to 60%. That is not a small number. That is the majority of what you paid quietly evaporating. Think about what that means in practice. A $35,000 vehicle purchased today will likely be worth approximately $14,000 to $17,000 5 years from now. The gap, $18,000 to $21,000, is money you spent on an asset that vaporized. You won't see it again. It won't appear anywhere in your net worth. This is precisely why buying a vehicle that's 2 to 4 years old is one of the smartest financial moves available to a middle-income earner. The math is simply undeniable. You let the first owner absorb the steepest part of the depreciation curve. You step in when the curve has already flattened, paying a fraction of what the car originally cost. And you're typically still getting the majority of its useful life ahead of you. The vehicle didn't get worse, it just got dramatically cheaper for reasons entirely unrelated to its reliability or quality. Here's the dimension of this that most people never fully confront. Every dollar locked up in a car payment is not just spent, it's also not invested, and that difference is enormous. In the math of compound growth, there's a profound difference between money that's spent and money that's working for you silently in the background every single day. Consider two people at the same income level. One buys a vehicle at the upper edge of their budget, payments around $650 per month. The other buys a modest used car with payments around $250 per month. The gap between those two decisions is $400 every single month. If that $400 per month is instead directed into a broad market index fund over 15 years at an average historical return of 7%, it grows to roughly $125,000. Over 25 years, that same $400 per month becomes nearly $325,000 from one car decision made once early enough in life. The person who chose the more expensive car didn't just spend more on transportation. They elected unknowingly in most cases to not have $325,000 in retirement assets. That's the real price of the upgraded model, not the sticker difference. The compounded cost of opportunity, a number that never appears on any window sticker or financing document. This calculation is what wealthy people understand intuitively. It's why the most financially disciplined high earners drive completely unremarkable vehicles, not because they can't afford better. It's because they've done the math. They understand that every dollar tied up in a depreciating asset is a dollar not working for them in an appreciating one. The car is not an investment. It is a tool, a necessary one in most circumstances, but a tool nonetheless. And tools should be evaluated on function, not status or appearance. Just as you wouldn't spend $4,000 on a hammer when a $40 one does the same job, you shouldn't spend six figures on transportation when a $15,000 vehicle gets you there just as effectively. There's a conversation worth having about the psychology of car buying, specifically the way people justify overspending with language about reliability and safety. I need something dependable. I can't afford to break down. I have kids. Safety is non-negotiable. These are real concerns, but they're frequently used as emotional cover for a decision that was already made on the basis of simply wanting something nicer. Because here's what the data actually shows about the used car market. Reliability and price are not positively correlated in the used car market, not even close. Spending more does not automatically mean getting something more dependable or safer. The vehicles that consistently rank highest for long-term dependability are overwhelmingly mainstream, affordable, unsexy options. Compact sedans, economy hatchbacks, practical crossovers from manufacturers with strong engineering reputations. You can buy a well-maintained, lower-trim version of one of these for $10,000 to $14,000 and realistically expect it to run cleanly for another 80 to 100,000 miles, with nothing more than routine maintenance. The engineering is proven, the parts are affordable, the ownership costs are low. These cars were built to last, and they do. What you're actually paying for when you go up market isn't reliability. You're paying for technology, comfort, status, and novelty. Those are legitimate things to want, but they are luxuries, and luxuries should be budgeted as such, funded from disposable income, not from the money that should be quietly building your financial foundation for the decades ahead. Let's close with a reframe. Most people approach a car purchase as a standalone transaction. What can I afford right now based on what I earn right now? That's the wrong lens entirely. The better question is, what does this decision actually cost me over the next decade when I account for what I'm not building? When you ask it that way, suddenly the calculus changes. The $15,000 used car doesn't feel like a sacrifice anymore. It feels like a deliberate, intelligent choice. A choice to stay liquid, stay invested, and stay out of the debt spiral that traps the majority of people earning perfectly good incomes in permanent financial fragility. The car you drive is not a reflection of your financial success. It is, in most cases, an indicator of how well the auto industry has convinced you to prioritize image over equity. The people quietly accumulating wealth in this country are not the ones rolling into the office in something new and impressive every few years. They made a different choice entirely. They're the ones who did the math and decided their future mattered more than their driveway. That's the mindset shift. That's the entire game right there. Drive something you can afford. Invest the rest. Give that money decades to grow and let the power of compounding do what no car payment ever could. And when you look back at this decision from the other side of financial independence, you'll realize something that very few people ever get the chance to understand. The most expensive car you never bought may have been the best financial decision you ever made, and it all started with asking a better question from the very beginning.